always be true. Hello and welcome back to the Always Be True podcast. And today, I'm really excited to be sitting here. Been wanting to do this podcast for a while with my very dear friend, Elan Hardy, who is also known as the Joy Reignition Specialist, Somatic and Sobriety Coach, and someone who, the things that I appreciate about Elan are, one, just your exuberance for life and how much fun you have in life and how much joy and light that you bring to the people around you. I just love spending time with you. And you've also been through a tremendous journey in your life, which would like to hear a little bit about today and hear some of your story. But the journey towards sobriety and true living the way we truly want to. So thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. I love you and I'm so happy to be speaking with you today. And can you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, I'm really happy to be here. You two are a dear friend of mine. And yeah, this has been a long time coming. I also just want to say, excuse my son in the background. He's got a little cough. So if you hear that little cough, he's back there coughing a little bit, and wish him well and send him health. That one was Derek.
Yeah.
As Derek mentioned, I'm a joy reignition specialist. So I work with people to reignite the joy in their lives that is always exists, but is subject to getting covered by years of difficult things that happen in life and challenges that we move through and trauma that we may experience. So it kind of gets clouded. Mm-hmm. So I help people rediscover and reignite the joy in their lives. And then I also help people, I'm a somatic sobriety coach. So I help people to rediscover their joy in life without alcohol. Mm-hmm. And somatic techniques help to move trauma that is stored in the body. And also find ways to combat craving, stress, and anxiety that are subject to coming up when you take away the crutch of alcohol, the dependency of alcohol. Then you get to come up with new coping mechanisms, which a lot of people aren't taught.
Yeah.
This is really important to teach children and to teach people ways to live in life and be present in their body. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'm remembering just when I first started drinking alcohol, probably in high school. I think I had tasted alcohol in like earlier years, and I was like, why would anyone drink this? Like I feel like anyone who's tried it for the first time is like, oh God, why would you drink this? And I just I remember when I started smoking weed and probably tobacco at that time, and drinking alcohol, it was really, for me, it was just everyone else was doing it. Like, it was just like, I was just trying to fit in and, go with the crowd. And I never really, for me personally, I never really liked it that much, but it was just like a social thing. Like, everyone was doing it, so I just did it. And so I was really happy to then find community where people were just having fun and doing the things that I like to do without alcohol. And it's really awesome to be able to see a changing world where people are finding more alternatives and other things to do. Why do people start engaging in drinking alcohol or doing, drugs of any kind?
So there's many different factors, I think, and there's different degrees of a person's dependency on alcohol or even of alcohol. There's people who are just completely turned off by it. Yeah. I think they're very evolved. Yeah. And then there's some people like myself where I wasn't very comfortable in my body.
Yeah.
I wasn't comfortable in my own mind. I didn't know how to process the feelings I was having. And when I drank alcohol, it gave me a barrier.
Yeah.
And a little numbing.
Yeah.
And so I didn't have to be fully present with the things that I didn't know quite how to handle. Yeah. So when I drank alcohol, I could feel safe. And I felt okay.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of people's feelings. They have a little bit of anxiety. They drink, it goes away temporarily. But actually, that's a myth because it causes more anxiety and depression.
Yeah.
And so the people who drink more substantially, it's the inability, I think, to process emotions, traumas, experiences in their life. They don't feel quite right and they don't know another way. And so that's why we have to be really careful not to be judgmental or not to condemn people who drink too much, because the thing is like, that's what they know.
Yeah.
That's the solution that they have.
Right.
And not only it's widely promoted in society.
Right.
You know, so it's not like if someone came up to you and they're like, I quit smoking crack, I don't smoke crack anymore. Someone would be like, that's probably good for you.
Right.
But like, if you say, I'm not drinking anymore, people go, why?
Right.
You have to give them a reason.
Right.
When really it's a class 1 carcinogen. Let's just get real.
Right.
You know, that's widely promoted for people to connect.
Yeah.
And so that's the key word here, I think, is connection and feeling safe and feeling good. And since it's so widely promoted as a way to connect, human beings crave connection.
Yeah.
They want to feel connected with other people.
Yeah.
And alcohol is a bridge. It's an illusion, but it's a bridge for people. Like, let's get together and have a drink. Let's go to this place. We're going to get drunk and we're going to start crying and say we love each other so much. We're going to make a huge connection in the bathroom at a bar and think that we're like soulmates. You know? And it's an illusion, because a lot of time you don't remember that, for starters.
Yeah.
But the other thing is, like, it's not a true connection of the heart, because you are under the influence of a substance that's toxic.
Yeah.
And so what human beings need to do is learn how to connect in another way and learn how to be in their body and be present. I tell my clients sometimes that when they meditate and breathe and start to move, like be curious with what's happening in their body, in their mind, and with their emotions, that is the polar opposite of drinking. Because drinking, you're trying to get away from what's going on in there.
Yeah.
And
You're
when you're
sedating.
sedating,
Yeah.
and when you're tapping in to your true presence, your true essence of who you are, what is a better way to connect than that?
Right.
With the true you.
Right.
To connect with somebody else. And so it's another thing that we have to be really, non-judgmental and caring and show love to the people who still really feel like they need alcohol.
Yeah.
Because what they really are saying is, I really want to connect and I don't want to feel alone and I want to feel okay in my body.
Yeah.
And that deserves like a little bit of attention
Yeah.
to it. And so when I work with clients, I teach them how to be okay in their body and teach them how to connect and have self-confidence and authenticity and reestablish joy in their life without the use of any substances.
Yeah. I feel like it's so important. For me personally, I went through a hard time. And it wasn't necessarily that I wasn't using, like, for me, just in my own personal experience, the use of alcohol and other substances, it never really like did the trick for me. I still had that anxiety. I still had this like deep social anxiety, but getting through that and finally arriving to a place where I was like, I confidently love myself. And like, it took a long time, and it took going through some like really challenging stuff. Like now I'm like, okay, it's easy. I love myself, and I wake up and I'm like, I love you so much. Like, and that's just one of the first things I say to myself in the morning. Like, I treat myself as if I'm my own child. You know, it's like, why would we not treat ourselves that way? But when I look back, I realize like it took some processing, and I don't think it needs to take that much to get through to that point, because in the end, what really happened was I just started saying, I like just getting used to the concept of loving myself. What was that process like for you in actually finding that authenticity with yourself?
Here's the thing that a lot of people want to avoid, is that life can be uncomfortable. We have to learn how to lean into being uncomfortable, because we live now in a world of so much comfort. You know, we're like, not only comfort, but lack of just being bored for a second, which is so good for the human mind, for our creativity, for our imagination. And so it's really important for us to learn how to not only be uncomfortable, but maybe be quote unquote bored for a second, not being constantly bombarded with entertainment or something to make us feel different. And so there's this interval that we have to lean into in the time that we are making a transformation. Because as is said time and time again, transformation change can be uncomfortable. Yeah. And because our society is so based on comfort these days, like it's hard for someone to be like, okay, like I'm going to be uncomfortable. Like to really be present with anxiety for a second, right? You're like, oh my gosh, I'm feeling anxious. Let me take a pill. Let me look at a screen. Let me take a drug. Let me take a drink because I can't stand being in my body. But what if we got curious? What if we sat with presence and looked and asked our body what is happening and just felt the feeling of being anxious? Like, what does that feel like? Is that going to make us explode? No, it's going to be okay. Yeah. We have to learn that things are going to be okay. And that gives us an opportunity. So there's this beautiful thing that happens when someone gets sober called the pink cloud. You know, so this happens often where someone gets sober and their life changes really quick and they're like not drinking anymore. They feel super great. And then they're like, oh, I guess I can drink again, you know, because things are okay. We have to take advantage of that opportunity where you actually feel okay, because the initial one is super uncomfortable. Yeah. Right. And then you have to lean into the discomfort of it. And then you feel you have this moment of clarity and feeling really good. And that's a grace of God. That we can use that opportunity to get to work, to find that what is going on within us where we want to escape. What is it that yearns for escape, for drinks, for the phone, for eating, for anything that disconnects us from being present? And learn, like, to shine a light within our being and look at ourselves without fear and start to how the best analogy that I've come up for this work. And this is the same with when I work with people who have no struggle with alcohol, and when I work with people who have struggles with alcohol, because I do both. The people in the program that I have called Joy Reignition, it's the same thing. You slow down, you look within yourself, and you do what I called weeding your garden. Because everything within us in our life is planted in a seed within us. From the time that we're a baby, there's seeds planted in our heart, in our spirit, that start to grow. And some of those seeds are not so good. Some of those seeds are lack of self-worth. Some of those seeds are an inability to feel peace. Yeah. You know, some of those seeds are fear of not feeling safe, of not feeling valued. And they grow in our life and start to color our world of how we see the world. And so it's so important that we look within ourselves and start pulling those from the roots, the weeds, because we have to find where the seed was planted in our life and pull it from there. And then also there's the other side to this too, where we have seeds of flowers planted within our lives that are really good, that make up the really good parts of our personality, good values, good belief systems that are there, both positive and negative. And it's up to us to tend to our garden and see what needs to stay and to be cultivated and to be watered, and what needs to go, what is not serving you, what you're drinking over, you know? Because we got to remove those, because that was what you were drinking over. Right. And if you don't, then you're just left with no solution and just suffering. Right. So, and then after that, it's about the maintenance. Yeah. Right? Still planting the flowers every year, every day, and still pulling the little weeds that grow before they grow into like huge roots. Yeah. And they take longer to pull out.
Yeah. What do you feel like? Okay, so when you have because I love this analogy and I find it so true, but the actual process is someone's like, okay, I want to find like the source of whatever it is, and then like pull that root and discard it. Like, what is that process of like pulling the weeds in the spirit?
Okay, so I think that's a really good question. So it's different with every single person. Okay, so say someone, I'll give an example of myself. That's the best way that I can do it. One of the things that I really needed to work on is my ability to feel safe and valued and worthy at all. Okay. And I'll tell you, when I examined this, like, where does this come from? Where is it that I don't feel lovable? And so I had to look at my life. You have to examine your life very closely. And so I looked at the first time. You have to go back in time, and you can do this. I do guided meditation, hypnotherapy with my clients too, where we can actually look within ourselves and our lives to find out like where that was first planted. Okay. And so when I do it with myself, this is going to give a little background about who I am. I was raised with hippie parents from Telluride, Colorado, and they were ski bums in the winter, and we went on Grateful Dead tour in the summer. And my dad, he was very young with 2 kids. He had 2 kids by the time he was 24 years old, and he got full custody because my mom was not in a place to be able to raise children at that time. And so we had this wild life, and he thought he was doing the best that he could with what he knew. And he would let us do pretty much whatever we wanted. And I didn't have boundaries, and I didn't have a bedtime, and I didn't have to do homework and all this. And what he thought he was doing was loving me, and giving me freedom. But what I've learned as a mother now is the importance of boundaries to make a child feel worthy and a child feel safe and cared for. And so when I didn't have any limits or any boundaries, and it didn't matter where I was, it planted a seed of feeling not cared for, not loved, and not worthy. And I'm saying this with full forgiveness and love for my father, because he was doing the best that he knew how. He didn't know what he was doing at that point, of the necessity for someone to have that like the container to feel safe in, the structure as a child. And so I had to go back in time and be like, okay, like I feel like this because of this. And is that true? Right? You have to be like the lawyer of like defending your case. Like, is this even true? Because my thoughts are saying this. Is this true? And then you can go back and realize like it's not even true. But then you have to wire your brain, because our neural pathways are so ingrained in that process of thinking that for so many years that you have to do everything you can. This is the work of spiritual evolution. You have to freaking want it. You have to do the work to want it, because you're changing some things that have been tendencies for sometimes 30 years. 20 years. I got sober when I was 28 years old, and I had to do this interpersonal examination that was no joke. To really look and be like, is this true? No, it's not true. It's a child of God. Loved unconditionally. My parents made mistakes. That's okay. I can forgive them. And that's the other piece. You have to fully forgive not only yourself for your actions, because you only knew what you knew, and the people around you, because they only knew what they knew. So that was following the seed of where that was planted of like the lack of self-worth and removing it. And how do I plant more seeds of worthiness? Like you were talking about loving yourself. How do we learn how to love ourselves? Treat ourselves like someone we love, especially within our thoughts. How are we thinking about ourselves? How are we talking about ourselves? And how do we transform the way that we're thinking about ourselves, the way that we're talking about ourselves? That's the real work too. And it can be done. It can be done.
It's so refreshing to arrive to a place. Like I'll just speak briefly personally. What I was thinking about when you did that is I realized it took me going through a lot in my life to realize how much my mode of operation was based on how I was being perceived because of wanting to belong. Like I want to belong so much. And then when I belong and I get that external validation of like belonging, and I did so through performing and being nice and people pleasing and all these different things, that then I was like, okay, cool. I got that reward. But then when I finally got to a point where I could like break that down and be like, no, like you don't need to go seeking that outside, and arrive to a place where actually there's genuine self-love, and I give myself the belonging, I give myself the validation, and I don't need like substance or other people to fill that part of my cup. It's now just like my favorite things to do are self-care. Like I just, whatever it is, whether it's like working out or meditating or whatever, those are my favorite things to do. It's like a complete shift. So I just wanted, that's like what that brought up for me. But I did want to ask you, like, can you share with us a little bit about your story and like, from that point in your life of being a child, and then as you grew and kind of like your experience with addiction and then getting through that?
Fasten your seatbelts, folks. It's so funny because recently I was on a podcast called Sober Mom Life. And it went really well. It was awesome. But I kind of like PG'd my story as much as I could because I was like, a lot of the listeners are like moms who drink wine at night, not like IV heroin users on the streets of San Francisco. So I was like, okay, like let's calm it down a little bit. So that was just a little little snippet. But anyway, so I
just want to let you know, you have full permission to this is always be true. It means like we're working on like true authenticity. You can tell us however you want to.
So as I said before, like that was the initial how I was raised. Like when I was little, how I was raised on tour, and then most of my life when I was young, I was just bopping around. Right, we moved from place to place. We lived in Crestone. We tried to build an earth ship. We lived in Hogans. We just like lived a very alternative lifestyle. And by the time I finally received a little bit of structure when my dad remarried to someone who had a little bit more structure in her life. And so she tried to, she worked to bring the force of structure into our lives. But at that time I was like total rebellious stage. And I was like, no way. Like, I'm definitely not going to listen.
Like
a teenager.
15, 16.
I was like 12 at that point.
Oh, okay.
But this is, so like a little bit about my introduction to drugs and alcohol. It was just like such a part of my life that I don't remember that first time where someone's like, oh my gosh, like this is the first time. I remember the first time that I smoked pot. We were on tour and my dad was smoking a joint and he said, you're going to do this eventually. So you might as well do it with me. And I remember thinking, oh, I've done this before. But I don't remember when. So I'd already smoked pot the first time I did. Mushrooms, I think I was like 8 years old the first time I did. Ecstasy, I was I think 10 years old. And acid around the same age. So it was just like always there. But I do remember the first time that I felt that relief of not, like it was like a freedom of not feeling so like taut in my body. Like the temperature was never right in the room. And it was when we were traveling in Mexico and I was running. I think I was about 8 years old and I stubbed my toe and my nail came off. And my dad and his girlfriend at the time gave me a shot of tequila and half of Vicodin. And I remember laying in a hammock and thinking, well, this is amazing. Wow. Because I feel okay. And I didn't feel okay. Wow. And that's my first realization. I didn't put it all together that I didn't feel okay in life. And now I did. And this is the difference between me and a lot of people or people who are subject to creating a dependency with alcohol is that they're like, I don't feel okay and this makes me feel okay. So I want to do this all the time. I don't understand why everybody else doesn't. And so anytime that I had an opportunity, I was there. I was there for it. And when I was in high school, I was like, everyone, like the other high schoolers, the middle schoolers, I would say it started in middle school, would be like drinking a beer here and there and then not drinking again. And I was wanting to drink all the time from the beginning because I didn't want to exist in my own body. I didn't want to exist in my own mind. I went to treatment the first time when I was 12 years old in Phoenix. And there was people that were so much worse than me that I just thought I wasn't so bad. And so I immediately went back and it wasn't by my choice. I was sent. And then again, when I was 16 years old, I was sent to a facility in Utah for 18 months. I ended up graduating from high school. It was a full lockdown facility. And then there I just found a way to manipulate the system and I was huffing computer duster and...
I huffed air duster every time in my life.
And like huffing computer duster and then writing like these intimate stories for the guys who were in another facility and then passing the notes and they would cheek their Adderall and hand me the Adderall for the stories that I would write because I've been a good writer. So anyway, and then I graduated from there and I tried to go to college, but I ended up like dating a coke dealer and became addicted to cocaine. And I was doing all sorts of other drugs. And then I moved back to Telluride, and I was just floating at that point. I moved back to Telluride. I was drinking all the time, doing cocaine all the time. And then by the time I was 22 years old, I met somebody who really cared about me a lot. And we tried to get me sober. I went back to where he lived in Pennsylvania, and it just didn't take. And I was still just completely out of control. And then we moved back to Durango. I tried to go to college. I failed out of college and was just drinking so heavily at that point. He was still with me. And when I was 26 years old, I was diagnosed with pancreatitis and hospitalized for a month. And I had cysts all over my stomach. Looked like I was 8 months pregnant. It was all bruised, my stomach. And I was so sick. It was the worst case of pancreatitis I'd ever seen from drinking so much. Wow. And they told me if I ever drank again that I would die. Wow. And the nature of my addiction was that I just kept, after 2 weeks, I found a beer and I tested the theory. How crazy is that? Like they tell you you're going to die and you're like, well, let me just see. And I wasn't like wanting to die. I was wanting to not feel bad.
Yeah.
And then they gave me a prescription, pretty much never ending, of opiates. And I became addicted to the opiates, and that was even better for me. I was like, oh, they told me not to drink alcohol. I guess I'll just have opiates. And so I was doing opiates all the time, became horribly addicted to them. And I got my boyfriend at the time, who was still with me, I got him addicted to them. And then it escalated them. It escalated to heroin and ended up being an IV heroin user. And I got him to do it too, even though he said he would never do it. And I ended up homeless, traveling around California. We tried to get sober on our separate to get sober after 7 years of being together and loving each other. And then I got a phone call saying that he had overdosed and he had died. And I felt like I had been hit in the heart with an axe. That's what it felt like, my whole body. So I'm a somatic healer now. I help people with somatic, because the connection, the mind-body connection, like how it feels when your heart breaks. You can feel in every pore of your body. It's not a mental thing too. It's it's connected to your body. It's stored in your body. I fell to the ground. And what happened in that moment is that first, like, I wanted to die because of the guilt that I felt. And just because how do I get to live? And what happened was, at that moment, I felt so much in pain, and everybody that knew him was heartbroken because he was such a good guy that I couldn't imagine doing that to everybody I loved by me dying too. Yeah. The pain that I felt, I couldn't do that to my dad. I couldn't do that to my mom. I couldn't do that to the people that loved me. That incredible amount of pain that I was feeling, I couldn't do that to somebody else. And so at that moment, I decided that I needed to try to change my life. And I begged my parents one more time to send me to a treatment facility. And no one thought I would make it. They said, don't waste your money. She's not going to make it. She's going to die. Don't waste your money on sending her to treatment. My dad had faith that I would turn it around. And so he paid for it for me to go to treatment. My 8-year-old brother at the time picked out the treatment facility, and they brought me. And I remember my dad told me that I was sleeping, and Michael says, my younger brother goes, why does she smell so bad? And they dropped me off at the treatment facility, and I was hospitalized again a couple days into the treatment because I had a blood infection, and I was so sick from everything I had done to myself. And then I came back to the treatment facility, and they put me on Suboxone to try to get off the heroin and all the drink. I was drinking again too. And then the treatment, this is so wild too. The treatment facility closed halfway through when I was in it. It like shut down. And then the guy, because the CEO of it had relapsed, and then he shows up there and gives everybody their pills back. And I'm like, oh my God, here I am with, I don't know if it was Suboxone, it was something that definitely, methadone. It's methadone. So it has like an effect on you, on me. And so they gave me the pills back, and then they sent me to an all-boys sober living house because it was what they owned too. So it was me and like 30 guys who were trying to get sober. It was really weird. And I had like a private room, but then I started doing the methadone by myself. And there was this moment, and my dad said, "Do you think you need more treatment?" And I said, "Absolutely." And he sent me to another treatment facility that had some Native American values, and they were going to do a sweat lodge. And I had already picked up my 30-day chip at that time because I had stopped drinking alcohol on January 11th, which was my dad's birthday. That's when he dropped me off as a birthday present to himself at treatment center. And we're about to do a sweat lodge. And I knew from my childhood of living, like practicing some Native American traditions and knowing about sweat lodges and doing them when I was younger, the power of what that is. And at that moment, I took my 30-day chip out of my pocket. And when it was my turn to speak, before I got into the sweat lodge, I said, "I'm giving the 30-day chip back because I did these pills. And I did them because I didn't feel right in my body and I wanted to feel different. And I want to feel right in my body. I want to feel okay. And I have to do that through being truthful, through being honest." And so I gave it back, and I found out the last day that I did the pills, and I changed my sobriety date. And so I've been sober since February 14th of 2014. And I went to the sweat lodge and ever since then I've been like working on myself. It's like deep search within myself to try to find out what needs transformed so that I can feel presence, so that I can feel love, so I can feel peace, so I can learn and grow and connect since then.
Wow. It feels like that sweat lodge was like a total like rebirthing process. But you had to keep up with it. Like you had to, like, it's not just like, okay, cool, I'm reborn and I'm done. Like I did it. It's like, no, it's just, you got to now do the work.
That's a thing that people, it's really important to recognize is that, you're still you.
Yeah.
You're still the person who did the drugs. I was still the person who did the drugs. I was still the person who drank.
Yeah.
What I needed to look at was the why behind it. I couldn't just like give up the drugs and then be like, la da da. I was like, I remember I had this really disappointing moment, like probably 5 months into my sobriety. And I was like, I had this, like, it dawned on me like so heavy. I was like, oh shit, like I'm still me. I'm still that person. And I need to continue to change and still continue to change.
Yeah.
I'm still working on things.
Yeah.
To this day, I'm like, oh, I need to change that.
Yeah.
Ooh, I need to change that. And the more that I transform about myself, the better I feel. So it's like I'm like a junkie for transformation now because I know that the result of transforming things for the better about yourself is that you get the opportunity to feel more joy and connection. And I love that. I want that.
The one thing that like really struck me, I've dealt with some guilt in my life, but the experience of feeling like you were responsible for someone else's death, like getting through that requires probably the most ultimate level of forgiveness because, I mean, that's just intense. Like to really have that weighing on your conscience and especially at that time and what everything that you were going through, how was that process for you of truly finding forgiveness with that?
This is a good question. It's really important. So, this is how I worked with that, is that for many, many years after I got sober, people told me, it's not your fault. It's not your fault. You have to let it go. It wasn't your fault that happened that way. It wasn't your fault. And as much as I worked to internalize that it wasn't my fault, what it actually took was a person that I really, really respect and love to look me in the eyes when I was crying about this situation. It was probably a year even later or more after I got sober and this all had happened, saying to me, you need to take responsibility for the part of this that was yours. It was partly your fault, and just told me the truth. And this might ruffle some feathers for people out there.
Yeah.
to hear this. But I needed to hear that because this state of vacillation of like, was it my fault? Like within me questioning, it had to be a little bit my fault. And then everybody telling me that it's not my fault. How could I reach a place of any sort of forgiveness when I'm on both sides of the fence?
Right.
And so when someone told me, yeah, actually you need to take a little responsibility for this, for your actions. And so I sat with that and like, that's intense to hear, right? That you're partly responsible for the death of someone's child, someone's brother, someone that I loved with my whole heart.
Yeah.
And after I heard that, I had said, okay, like I need to take responsibility. And then I had to forgive myself for it. And so what that looked like for me was like truly feeling the pain of what that means. Like deep in the essence of my being, of the pain of what that is, to be partly responsible for the end of somebody's life, and really hold that tender pain, and then work to release it from my body and vow to never do that again, to never act that way again, and devote my life to helping people find sobriety on the other end. And so, and it was more than that, dude. Like, it wasn't just like this one moment where I was like, okay, I'm feeling the pain. I'm asking for forgiveness. It was that. So it took like 6 months of like, cause if you want to forgive or be forgiven, forgive yourself, forgive others, like you have to truly want it. And sometimes it takes a lot of time and you have to be patient with yourself. Not just like, oh, dang, I tried once and like, I don't feel better, Yeah. Like I was like crying and on my knees and asking God. I formed a relationship with God through this, of like, when can I feel released from this pain and really forgive myself? And I think one of the important things to note is like, how do I know, right? How do I know if forgiveness has taken place? Is that I can sit here and talk to you and feel peace. And not to say that like what I did wasn't really intense, but I can't hold that forever. I can't hold a backpack full of rocks.
Right.
I can take responsibility and ask for forgiveness and find peace in my heart, but I can think about the situation and who he was in my life and feel love and not guilt and not pain.
Right.
I can feel like missing him, but I don't feel the same like twisted up heart full of rocks over it, because I wanted to work through it and not hold that anymore, because we don't need to hold things, but we need to feel the pain of what we did and we need to recognize it and really release ourselves from it, or we cannot continue to evolve of who we are and be happy.
Yeah, wow. Thank you for sharing that. It's it's really powerful, and something that comes up when I think about forgiveness is like, if we do something, this podcast is the Always Be True podcast, and I've spent time examining this word of true. Like what is true, and what is true is real, and there's also the aspect of the word true of like to make right. And like truing a wheel means like bringing it into straightness so that it can turn, so they can operate properly, kind of getting the kinks out. And one of that, it's also like a form of balancing, of like bringing things back into alignment. And so when I think of forgiveness, it's like, it doesn't really work to just say, okay, I forgive myself and move on, if you haven't seen the reflection of what it is and truly understand what it is that you did, so it's like this, and people talk about karma and merit, and that the universe has this reflexive property of like, okay, if I do something bad, I need to receive something bad. And I think like for me, it's not necessarily you have to receive in the material world, but you have to experience what it is that you did for it to like bring balance. So understanding that, like, if we want to truly forgive ourselves, we need to know what it is that we did. So I just thank you for, and knowing, not just knowing and understanding in our mind, but knowing like in our heart and feeling like, okay, like I have now experienced that degree of intensity or that suffering, whatever. And now that I know it, I can let it go, and let it. So, wow. Like, thank you. And to share so vulnerably and so intensely, I hope for people listening can really help them to, one, know that a lot of the things that we find so intense, like we can, as humans evolving in this world and this place that we choose to incarnate, that we can get through it, that there is always a way, even if there is, like, it seems like we've done the worst thing or the worst thing has been done to us. Like, there is purpose in all of it. We can find that purpose, that light in what it is that we're doing. Thinking about your experience, like, though at the time so intense and so much suffering, now brings this visceral and this true knowledge and wisdom and experience that you can bring now, and the quality of who it is that you are now, just having the past that you have and being able to help people truly. So knowing, part of what's coming up for me thinking about this is that any challenge, any issue, any sin, anything that we go through, when truly overcome, becomes strength, becomes this gift that we can bring to the world. So thank you so much for sharing your story. Truly.
Thank you, Derek. I really appreciate that. And you're absolutely correct. Every single thing can be overcome, and it becomes strength, and it becomes, resilience and ability to rise up and transform. And it also gives hope for people. Anything can be felt, and when you were talking about, we were both referring to the pain, that we can feel to let something go, like the suffering, that in order to move towards forgiveness. It's the same thing with any feeling that we're having. And a lot of people in this world have an inability to feel the feelings that they're having, and they're scared of the feelings. They're scared of being in their body, of what they're thinking. That creates feelings, creates actions. And it's so important that we teach our children and learn to talk about more like emotional regulation and somatic wisdom, and learning how to be present with our feelings, with our bodies. Because if we push them away, if we mask them, not only with drugs and alcohol, but with social media and our phones and constantly being entertained, I'm avoiding what I'm feeling. And things are not so scary. If we just face them head on, let them move through us. Because if we avoid them, they live in our body, in our soma. And it can cause all sorts of dysregulation in our lives. We need to learn how, as a society, to feel and to process our emotions, to move through things, to see the trauma that has occurred in our life rather than avoid it, and learn how to work through it. And if we don't know how to do it, we ask somebody who does. Because there's so many things. I did not do this alone. Where I am now, I worked with so many mentors. I did so many transformational workshops. I did so much work. I had so much help. People need to band together, ask for help, rise up, learn how to process and how to look at themselves and let go of what's not serving us. Because it can happen with anybody. And one of the things that I really want to caution people of is comparative suffering, to not be like, well, it's not that bad, because I didn't do what Elan did on that podcast, I only have this, but don't we all want to be happier? Don't we all want to feel better? Don't we all have work to do? We don't want to be like, oh, okay, at least it's not that bad. Let's all look at our shit and get better. I still have so much stuff I need to work on. And I'm happy to do it because I know the results make me feel more joy. I get to feel more joy.
The humility of having this is my baggage that I have to. I'm gonna work on this. I don't need to compare to other people's size of their bags. I'm gonna work on this one. This is mine.
Totally.
Yeah. And I just wanted to reflect too, just how beautiful your life is now, and like how like we have Judah in the background watching a movie, and Iona, you have 2 beautiful children and such an amazing life, and it like you said, it brings hope. So thank you so much for joining me today on the Always Be True podcast. And where can people find you?
Thank you. So you can find me on Instagram, joy_reignition_specialist.
Okay.
And then there's links there in my bio to my webpage, and also to book a discovery call, a strategy call with me. And yeah, I'd love to talk to anyone. If you want to reach out to me, follow me. I offer a lot of support through my Instagram. I'm also thinking of changing the name of my Instagram, but right now I'm keeping it right there. So
Yeah.
But yeah, come join me on this path to more joy.
Yeah. I always like to leave with just like one little thing, especially in the realm of somatic. For me lately, it's like I wake up in the morning, every morning and every evening before I go to bed. The first thing I do is I say thank you for this day, and I love you, I love myself, and please help me to just stay aligned in my life. That's like my little thing that I do. What's a little thing that you do in your life that maybe helps you, or just like a little nugget that can help people through their day?
So there's this liminal space. You mentioned waking up in the morning, that it's like the different wavelengths that the mind can be at. And in the morning, you can really connect with the ability to manifest things in your life and create the life you want. I call it mind blueprinting in my program, because I kind of don't love the term manifest, because it's a little overused, a little cliche at this point, because it's kind of gives people the idea that if you just sit there and meditate, like things come to your doorstep, like deliveries. But it's not like that. Mind blueprinting is what I call it, is where you create what you want within, because everything that exists in the real world existed in the manifest world first. And so with mind blueprinting, it's creating a blueprint for your life of how you want it to look, but it's up to us to do the work, to build the house of our life. And so that in the morning, right when you wake up, if you think about how you want your life and your day to go, and just really bring it into your mind's eye of like, this is what I want, and this is how to get there. And if you want things in your life, you have to want them in the morning, in the daytime, and at night. It has to be firm of what you want to create the life that you want. And so that's what I can say, is if you want something in your life, you can do anything you want. I'm a testament to creating what you want, going from the streets of an IV drug user to where I am now in my life, with 2 beautiful children, a loving husband, a beautiful house, a lot of friends and community, and helping others too. Like anything can be done if you fix your thoughts on what it is. And one other thing is that stop thinking you're not your thoughts, people.
Yeah.
You're not your thoughts. You can start to choose them.
Yeah.
I like to talk about that a lot too.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Elan, for joining me on this podcast today. And it's been a lovely conversation. I appreciate you so much. I love you. For anyone listening, Joy Reignition Specialist with underscores between the words on Instagram. Reach out to her. And we'd love to hear what you guys think of this episode too. Is there anything else that you want to leave before we sign off?
No, I think I'm good. Everybody, love you guys.
I love you
Love
so
you,
much.
Derek.
I love you so much. Thank you guys for tuning in to the Always Be True podcast, and we'll see you on the next one. Always be true.